Hey there, friends. This is Pastor Micah at Life's Journey, United Church of Christ. I hope all of you are doing well. Um, we have just finished wrapping up the book of James during our midweek reflections, and we are wrapping up studying Luke together in my Sunday sermon. So I thought it would be good the next few Wednesdays during our midweek reflections to share a bit from a section of Jesus' teaching in Luke we didn't really get to study during the year, which is a section of Jesus' teachings called the Sermon on the Plain. This is another sermon Jesus shares, this time not from a mountaintop. If you'll remember, in the Gospel of Matthew, there is a Sermon on the Mount from a mountaintop, but there's a slightly different spin on things in this Sermon on the Plain. The sermon is found in Luke 6, verses 20 through 49, and it occurs after Jesus has prayed through the night, seeking God's direction about who will help him spread God's message as apostles. We pick up our readings in Luke 6, uh, verse 17. Luke 6, verse 17. Jesus came down from the mountain with them and stood on a large area of level ground. That's why it's called the Sermon on the Plain. A great company of his disciples and a huge crowd of people from all around Judea and Jerusalem and the area around Tyre and Sidon joined him there. They came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and those bothered by unclean spirits were healed. The whole crowd wanted to touch Jesus because power was going out from him and healing everyone. Jesus raised his eyes to his disciples and said, "Happy are you who are poor, because God's kingdom is yours. Happy are you who hunger now, because you will be satisfied. Happy are you who weep now, because you will laugh. Happy are you when people hate you, reject you, insult you, and condemn your name as evil because of the human one. Rejoice when that happens. Leap for joy, because you have a great reward in heaven. Their ancestors did the same things to the prophets. But how terrible for you who are rich, because you have already received your comfort. How terrible for you who have plenty now, because you will be hungry. How terrible for you who laugh now, because you will mourn and weep. How terrible for you when all speak well of you. Their ancestors did the same things to the false prophets. Jesus begins his time of ministry by caring for the poor, the hurting, the sick, and the broken, helping them find comfort and healing. I think for this reason, having listened to their story and seen what they're going through, Jesus lists a different set of blessings than we see in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5 in his Sermon on the Mount. And the Beatitudes are what we normally learn growing up in church. And in that sermon, Jesus calls blessed in the Beatitude qualities like being poor in spirit, being meek or humble, being peacemakers, and so forth. He focuses on the attitudes we can have that are reflective of a heart moved and transformed by God, a heart ready to transform the world. But in Luke's Sermon on the Plain, Jesus' focus is on particular people's situations in life, on those who are in fact poor, those who are in fact hungry, those who weep, those who face discrimination, saying that whether they are good people or not, spiritual or not, these suffering and marginalized ones are the ones Jesus' kingdom calls blessed, not the rich and comfortable of the world. God has a special place in God's heart for the poor and the hurting. As the Psalms teach us when they say things like they do in Psalm 113, verses 7 through 9, that God lifts up the poor from the dirt and raises up the needy from the garbage pile to seat them with the leaders of God's own people. God nests the once barren woman at home now a joyful mother with children. What does it look like to see the world with God's eyes? Two preachers who have shaped my thinking about this are Karen Olivito and Henry Nouwen. Karen Olivito, a bishop in the Methodist Church, their first bishop who was openly lesbian, writes about this perspective in her book Together at the Table. After one particularly long day at church I was pastoring, I was ready to get home and began to make my way to the train station. I crossed one of the streets and saw a woman passed out lying in her own urine. I wanted to turn away, but there was something about her that made me keep looking at her. Did I know her? In one hand, there was a Barbie doll. Barbie's blonde hair and elegant dress were in stark contrast to the woman's greasy hair, torn clothes, and dirty hands that held the doll. I had to wonder, did her mother give her a Barbie when she was younger? Did she have siblings, perhaps even children of her own? What pushed her to the streets? Did anyone miss her? Was there someone out there wondering what had happened to her, looking for her, searching for her? Was there someone who cared about her, wanting to hold her as tightly as she clung to Barbie? She was someone's daughter after all. She was someone's daughter. She was someone's daughter. Then I realized she and nameless countless others will take their places in our city sidewalks, as long as we think they are someone else's family. Do we see those on the streets as our kin, people we miss, those we've been searching for, loved ones we long to hold and care for? Our streets will remain the address of the forgotten and overlooked. It was my experience of the unconditional love and acceptance as expressed at the church I was serving then that opened my eyes. The woman who held the Barbie doll tenderly, tightly in her hand, I now recognize as my daughter, my sister, my mother. It is love that connects us and changes us, turning strangers into family members we didn't know we were missing. As I reflect on my own spiritual growth, I realize that my greatest lessons didn't come from seminary classrooms, lectures by brilliant theologians, or even engaging Bible studies. It was my relationships with those who are different from me, particularly those most different to me, like the homeless, that helped me see God's face more clearly. Before I began as pastor at this church, my commitment to diversity was largely intellectual. While I valued diverse opinions, authors, and people, my world was homogenous. I had many white, well educated, middle class friends. While my words spoke about a commitment to diversity, the life I led was anything but. Much like those Illinois whites in research I had read who claimed to want to diverse neighborhoods but chose not to live in them. I was committed to just and fair policies for homeless people, but I was not in relationship with anyone who was actually homeless. I worked for homeless people instead of with them. There were regulars on the street I walked who I would not nod to when running errands, but I never stopped to talk with them and get to know their life stories. There was one man who stood on a street corner day in and day out. He was a large man. His feet were wrapped in dirty bandages that oozed blood and pus. He would stand on that street corner and sing the blues like an angel. I encountered him in a deeper way one Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon for pastors is the time of the week when we, or at least I, am simply good for nothing. By Sunday afternoon, having spent myself in worship, about the only thing I can do is take a nap. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk with anybody. Basically, I'm not fit for human contact. One Sunday, I had to go to run an errand in the afternoon before crashing on the couch. It was one of those Sunday afternoons when I shouldn't have been out in public. If anyone came close, I'm sure I would have reflexively responded with a growl. I was walking along the street where the homeless guy was singing. I was exhausted, head down, collar up, and I raised my head, and our eyes met. And he looked at me with this big wide grin, and he said, "Sister, do you have love in your heart?" I felt like the air had been pushed out of my lungs, and I was in the tightest double bind of my life. Have I got love in my heart? Have I got love in my heart on Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock? I couldn't say no because I knew that wasn't altogether true, but I confess I didn't want to say yes. I didn't want to say yes because I was afraid of what a yes answer would entail. I was tired and I was cranky, and if I said yes, I knew something would be required of me that I simply didn't want to muster the energy to offer. The last thing I wanted to do on Sunday afternoon between 3 and 4 o'clock was to have love obligate me to do anything, because obligations to one another is what love is all about. We live in an age when love seems in exceedingly short supply. If we have love in our hearts, it means we're going to live in ways that improve not just ourselves, but everyone. We're going to make choices mindful of how every choice we make affects everyone else in the world. Love requires us to remain connected to one another. It means that your life matters to me. I am going to enter into your joy, but I'm also going to walk with you when you are hurting the most. And when it gets too hard, I'm going to offer to carry you. Love is hard work, especially in a world that disappoints, in a culture where it's every man, woman, and child for themselves. In times like these, when it's unfashionable to empty oneself for another, the demands of love, what it requires, seem too high. And that's exactly how I felt that Sunday afternoon in San Francisco. The price of love seemed high when it was all that I could do just to walk down the street. Still, the singer of the street's question still nags at me. Sister, do you have love in your heart? This love ought to motivate me to break down the arbitrary barriers that we put each other in, so that I can encounter others in all their dazzling diversity and beauty. This love I have for myself and my well-being ought to cause me to extend that well-being to others, especially the most vulnerable. I'm going to love you the way I love myself, because in the end, we all will be changed, and we all will be brought to a place of wholeness, of healing, of justice and joy. So continues Pastor Bishop Oliveto. There I was facing this question that was posed to me. Sister, do you have love in your heart? And I finally was able to look the singer in the eye. Yes, yes, I have love in my heart. And he spread his arms wide and said, then give me a hug. When we open ourselves to the diversity found in the lives around us, we find ourselves standing on holy ground. We learn that God speaks to those who aren't like us, and sometimes provides us with our deepest spiritual lessons. There's nothing to fear as we discover our lives are enriched beyond measure by those we once discounted or ignored. The world becomes even more precious, full of surprises that enrich our lives. Love is let loose in the world, and this love changes everything. This lesson, Bishop Oliveto learns through her encounters with those our world casts off and disposable, is what author Henry Nouwen calls reverse mission. I have become, he writes, aware that wherever God's Spirit is present, there is a reverse mission. He refers to the common realization that those whom we believe need our help, our mission field, often have more to offer us than we have for them. Nouwen continues, the poor have a mission to the rich. The blacks have a mission to the whites. The handicapped have a mission to the normal. The gay people have a mission to the straight. The dying have a mission to the living. Those whom the world has made into victims, God has chosen to be bearers of good news. I want to challenge all of you this week to think about how you can embrace this reverse mission. Embrace the boundary and crossing love Jesus talks about here in Luke. I think when we do so, we too will find our lives in perspective opening up. God bless you. Hope to see you this Sunday, 10:30, at Life's Journey United Church of Christ on Edgewood in Burlington, North Carolina. You take care now until I see you then. Bye-bye.